Thank you, Samantha. Welcome everyone to This Month in Cyber for September. We have a pretty full agenda, ironically, today. I know there's only 3 items on there, but kind of want to dive in a little deeper on a couple of the topics there, just to make sure that we not only know some of the stories that have occurred from the month and how that might impact us, but also what we can do about it, right? Really, the whole goal of this exercise is to kind of bring some stories to light and kind of talk about topics that are really affecting us. Ransomware, and if it hasn't impacted you, you're certainly protecting from it, but it's something that is top of mind for a lot of organizations. We'll talk about National Preparation Month and kind of what that really should mean in terms of incident response plans. And we'll talk about identity compromise. So some recurring themes from a vulnerability perspective, but ultimately this is really what we as IT folks are chartered to protect against. So without further ado, let's jump into some stories from the month. This actually, if you look at the date down the bottom right, is actually from August, but being at the tail end of the month, it didn't make last month, so we're throwing it in here. Interesting organization called DarkSide. Okay, I think of DarkSide as a good marketing name for an organization, and literally that's why they chose it. They guarantee turnaround times. They have real-time chat support. They're actually marketing and having brand awareness just like a regular organization. They've promised not to attack hospitals or schools or governments, but basically they are a company. And as a company, their goal is to get you to use them, which is their product is ransomware, and they'll do ransomware as a service. So they have all the elements of an organization, but their goal is to simply help you attack other companies. They analyze the accountancy, they call it, meaning the financial capabilities of every customer they attack. They provide custom ransomware. They'll look at Zoom info. They actually have a bot that will go out and strip all the credentials from Zoom info to tell you, how many employees you have, what your revenues are, and how much, what your EBITDA is, and whether you're likely to be able to pay a $4 million ransom or a $2 million ransom, and things of that nature. This past week, they had one of their first entries. They take 200 gig of data, or as much data as they can exfiltrate, and then they'll take snippets of the good stuff from that data after they've looked through it, and they'll take snippets of it, post it up on their website, and basically say, we have your data. Okay, so at this time, you've been ransomwared, but at the same time, they have your data, they have snippets of it, and you have 48 hours to pay them so that they don't take the data and go sell it. And so you're paying them not only for the ransomware key, but you're paying for them not to take your data and put it out there and sell it to others. And oftentimes that might be contracts and so forth. So, and if you're waiting for the US government to kind of come help, crack down on people like DarkSide, know that the last legal action against DarkSide here was, well, actually against any ransomware was in December when they took down a ransomware kingpin. They indicted the Russian head of the Evil Corp hacking corporation, and they're the ones who shut down Garmin in July. So they're perpetuating. They continue even when the governments are shut down, and really we as a marketplace are going to be dealing with ransomware for quite a while. Along that same vein, more ransomware. This is an organization that is in the top 10 from a market capitalization perspective. This reads like a novel almost. 27-year-old Russian was charged with paying a current employee. So Tesla hired a Russian-speaking employee who had been worked on and had been communicating with someone from Russia. And this person from Russia had wined and dined him. Per the article, the employee came into the country on July 28th. I'm sorry, this is the the ransomware handler, if you will. Came into the country at the end of July. Early July, he was speaking with this employee, wined and dined him. And long story short is they were going to pay the employee $1 million to plant to provide them an entryway. And so they had done some test things where he had complied with them for smaller amounts of money. And prior to him allowing the ransomware to be planted, if you will, for which they were going to pay him $1 million, he decided to turn. He told his bosses about it, and furthermore, they told the FBI. The FBI was able to track conversations and activities, and long story short, as they found while the gentleman that was a ransomware handler was going to the airport to get out of the country, thinking that, hey, I've been found, the FBI got him at that point. But it was a $4 million plan. They were going to pay the gentleman, the employee, $1 million. They had $250,000 that had already had some customized malware. The ransomware gang boss was going to get $2 million, and there was going to be some miscellaneous numbers for others. But so whether this is a $4 million, exercise to get in Tesla, or it's a $1 million exercise to get in an organization of our size, either way, are there employees that we have that would take $50,000 to open up a ransomware hole? So it's kind of another interesting avenue as to how ransomware might get in, not just by phishing, but by literally paying a direct employee. So that was averted, thank goodness, for Tesla. Another story from the month, and this was early in the month. It almost made last month, I believe. As you can see, it's on August 31st. This is something called Ma Labs. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they are a really large supplier of components to PCs. They have like 10,000 customers, and some of those customers are Dell and HP and so on and so forth. They have 10 major sites around the globe. They had some malware called Revil or R-Evil. And actually, it's kind of becoming less and less the software called R-Evil than it is a ransomware gang called R-Evil, similar to that other one that was called DarkSide. They had 950 gigabytes, almost a terabyte of data that was exfiltrated. Samples were put on the auction site. That should be familiar. And in 48 hours, they were told you have to pay, or we're going to release this data. And some of that data included, emails, bank-related files, certificates for issued shares of stock, and that's what they knew the organization has. They really didn't know what else they could have had. So, technically, imagine you as an organization having 2 days to technically figure out, is this real? Did they exfiltrate my data? And are they still able to exfiltrate my data? And then from a business perspective, imagine having to determine the value of that data that was exfiltrated, or you think was exfiltrated, and the business and reputational loss. Imagine, and then, oh, by the way, all of your computers are also locked up, and you need to recover those. And you've got, a lot of things to be doing all within a 48-hour time period. So wouldn't it be better to do that business impact analysis and evaluate your data in advance of this? So I guess that's one of the things, while the clock is ticking, is not necessarily the time to go, I wonder what the value of that data is worth. What will insurance pay for? Am I properly insured? How good is my team? Who do we call? All of these things can be thought of in advance, and certainly we'll talk about incident response plans and business impact analysis, but those are a couple things to be thinking about as an organization. Now is, 48 hours is not the time to determine if your data has value and whether it's something to pay or not. So, another story, this one just came up yesterday, late edition. Obviously all the details are not out yet, but Universal Hospital System, 400 hospitals across the US and UK. Some hospitals have been down since Sunday. Confirmed issues in North Carolina and Texas. Similar issues reported in Arizona, Florida, and California. It appears that they have Ryuk ransomware, which is one of the nasty ones that we've kind of talked about. I don't know if it's a specific gang that uses Ryuk. Ryuk, one of the things I can recall about it from previous months is even if you were to get the ransomware keys, the way it encrypts the data is not fully usable. It's like 17% of the data can still not be used. So imagine having, 300 Word files that you got back. Oh, great, I got my files back because I paid the ransom. Well, 30 of them might still not be used, or whatever the numbers may be. But it's just amazing. And now it's impacting a hospital, which obviously is impacting care for some people. So some gangs have no lines, if you will. Ransomware continued to kind of bring this a little closer to home. Ransomware has been hitting schools. A lot of these schools were hit just as they were opening. You can see Hartford Public Schools. The actual city was hit in Hartford, which impacted a number of systems. I think they had 300 systems impacted. And as a city, they run some services, including busing systems that the kids use. And so because those systems could not be used for the buses, they ended up delaying school for a few days to not open on time. So this was on top of pandemic and all the other school opening plans. You can imagine another challenge being thrown upon them. They communicated, here's another poor one. They communicated on Tuesday morning, they determined, even though they got ransomware on Saturday, it was on Tuesday morning, they finally communicated that indeed some systems that were going to impact their ability to open as a city were going to impact the schools. And so some of the schools were obviously, and some of the parents were obviously angered that they got communicated to so late, had to take the day off of work and things of that nature. By the way, this school there are 16 other schools, big name schools. Fairfax County, one of the 10th largest school districts in the United States, was also impacted this past month. So there are 16 stories about schools and school districts that have had to delay openings because of the same story. Ransomware, exfiltrated data, ransoms being paid or not paid, and services being down. So a significant amount of activity around ransomware this past month. All right, and then I think I just add further to this story with Peters and Associates stories. We've got a customer that had 80 servers, and it cost about $100,000 to get back to original state, just from a recovery perspective. Keep in mind, Peters and Associates expertise is not necessarily on the forensic side, though we do have some capabilities to identify likely sources and so forth. But our skills are usually on the recovery side, helping you look at which servers were impacted, looking at how to get those servers back up and functional, prioritizing that. We're essentially unfolding your incident response plan, technically, usually under quick gun, right? And so you're oftentimes calling us, and hoping that we have some resources that are willing to work late into the night to help you restore. And so we have helped in a lot of cases. And if I kind of looked at, the organizations we've helped in recent months, 80 servers, 50 servers, we had a 5 server. In general, what we're finding is that it looks like it's about $1,500 to, if I was estimating, $1,500 per server for just the recovery aspect of things. So if you looked in your server environment and just started adding up, let's say you have 10 servers, you're looking at, 1,500 times 10, 15 grand, and that's just for recovery. And then outside of that, you're going to have legal, contracts and reputation, forensics, insurance. You're going to have your employees that are like, oh, what kind of organization do I work for that got hit? And then all you're going to be doing, and that's just to restore you back to where you were, and then you're going to go implement the security precautions that maybe you should have launched to prevent some of this ransomware to get go. So let's kind of talk about that. So, set yourself up budget-wise, and I guess use this as evidence to convey that ransomware is real and that there are some significant costs should this occur, and you need to be prepared. And so what does prepared look like? Well, I break this into buckets kind of quickly here. This is a slide I've used before. If I was to do 5 things for you, there are certainly things that fall into certain buckets: protecting, detecting, and responding. Protecting is obviously about trying to prevent it from happening at all. And backup is a great area, firewall is a great area. Detection is much more around finding out if there's some bad, nasty things potentially happening in my environment. Closing your eyes doesn't work, right? So what are the tools and where are the indicators of compromise, as we call it, that are occurring so that you can see this? And last is responding and having the incident response plan for an organized what to do, who to call, and so forth. So in more detail, and I'll go through these a little quicker because I know this is repetitive to things we've done before, there are a number of things you can do to protect yourself. And if we were to put them into categories and buckets, I'd kind of lay it out this way, okay? Make sure that you have the 5 things that are crawling. Make sure that in the walking stage that you've got, front end email and you're training your employees and you're looking at where people are going on the internet. From a detection perspective, you should be running and looking at logs in Office 365 and looking at who's authenticating and our mailboxes being forwarded and other indicators of compromise. You should be doing port scans and so forth. And from a responding perspective, obviously make sure you have an incident response plan. We'll talk a little bit more about the incident response plan as that's another topic, but just to dive in real quick on backups, I think I showed this slide last week for those that may have joined. Backups relatively simple, meaning you should have 3 copies of your data, 2 stored on different media, 1 stored off-site. But one of the things we're finding, in addition to all these elements, is that you need to encrypt it, right? You need to test your backup recovery, and you need to isolate your backups from Active Directory, and then separately, you need to isolate your backups from themselves and from your network. And so that leads us to this last point where we actually changed the age-old guidance from 3-2-1 to add on another 1 at the end, 3-2-1-1, where 1 copy is stored offline. Your backups and the ability to not get to them, air gapping them, offline, tape, whatever terminology you would like to use, make sure that the bad guys can't get to the backups, because the first thing they're doing nowadays is they're going to your backups and they're deleting them. They want to be successful after all, and your backup stands in the way of gathering a ransom or making sure that you have pain. So we're finding that offline backups are critical. So whether you're implementing the backup or we're implementing the backup, all of these things need to get done and be done efficiently. And for us, implementation of that, managing it on a daily basis, doing the recovery, making sure you have air gapped, all starts around $700 a month for our customers. And we're doing this for dozens of customers to help them protect and kind of offload backup services from their IT. All right, that was kind of topic number 1. And topic 2 and 3, as you can imagine, are not nearly as extensive, but kind of apropos that September is National Preparedness Month. Now, from a government perspective, that actually means a lot of things. It means like have a family plan, what occurs when a disaster occurs and so forth. And in the cybersecurity world, which is referenced, both articles are referenced down the bottom right there, it means have an incident response plan. And incident response plans are, hopefully every organization has one. And if you don't have one, now could be a great time to develop it. Even if you do have one, if it's dusty, right, and you got to kind of get it out of the proverbial box, that incident response plan needs to be modernized. We have a incident response plan modernization checklist, which is referenced there. A few of the checklist items are there in terms of how to quickly identify whether this is an event or an incident and kind of differentiate between the two, how to assess the nature and scope of that incident to see whether you should be spending more time investigating or who might it have impacted and so forth. So check out the modernization checklist. I think that would be a helpful start to kind of see how yours passes muster. Some areas where we've helped organizations with their incident response plan is, first of all, building one. If you don't have one, there's a policy and a process to build them. Oftentimes starts with a business impact analysis, which is, where is my data? How much value is it to you? If you recall back to some of the previous people that had ransomware, they were trying to do that in a 48-hour time period under the proverbial gun, right? Now's the time to be doing that exercise, not trying to determine what kind of data is stored where and how impactful it is to your customers. Data significance is along that same line, and then also getting your vendors aligned, insurance, legal, forensics, recovery. There's also the IRP modernization, right? And making sure that your IRP is up to snuff. And then if those were numbered properly, instead of 113 and 123, number 3 would be making sure that your incident response plan is known, is trained on, is tabletop testable, meaning if I was to throw a scenario at your organization and business leaders, would they be capable of responding? And what is your team response? We've facilitated testing and results for organizations before and just kind of committed a memo to file and make recommendations for the next year when you go about and go do more testing. So that was sort of topic number 2, is just develop an incident response plan, put some items around it. Topic 3 is all about identity, and certainly is a topic we've covered before to some degree, but to that degree I highlight what we've known, which is Office 365 credentials, by their very nature, can be compromised. Okay, and point of fact from Microsoft themselves, what they see in their numbers is that 0.5% of all Azure AD accounts are compromised each month. That means if you have 200 users, one of your accounts was compromised this month. If you have 1,000 users, 5 of them were compromised this month. It just happens. How does it happen? Well, the fact is 40% of the time, they just guess what your password is. Okay, they run these algorithms over the thing and just guess and figure it out. Okay, because people use the same passwords or common passwords. And so if I run a dictionary attack, I can figure out what that password's going to be just by running over with heavy computers. The second is I could replay it. I found your passwords over on this website. I'm replaying them and you use the same passwords. Okay, so that's the reuse. So if you could stop both of those, right? The ability to guess them and the ability to reuse them, you're 80% of the way. Then all you have to worry about is the phishing, right? And the last mile, which is, hey, I'm going to send in a customized email and you're going to click a link, which is what everyone thinks is the way that all these accounts are getting compromised. No, it's kind of the last mile. So I put those stats up there just to show you what the numbers bear out from Microsoft's own investigation. And what does that lead to? What does an Office 365 credential lead to? No big deal, right? Well, here's a federal agency where it's one of our federal agencies. I don't know who it is. Let's pretend like it's not the CIA or someone of that nature, and let's just say it's an agency. This is in the past month, ZDNet's reporting, in fact, just in the last week or so, compromised some Office 365 credentials, which gave them, they moved laterally and got some domain admin and Pulse secure VPN credentials. They then looked at all the emails floating around the organization and looked for attachments that had been sent around about VPN passwords and intranet access. They studied Active Directory and the structure of the internal network. They then set up a backdoor using SSH tunnel and a reverse, and I can't even say this, SOCLS proxy, meaning it's backdoor. You don't know that I'm communicating through your firewall because I'm just using port 80 stuff or 443. Then they customized some malware, and they had a hard drive within the environment that they owned that was cloud mounted sexually. So whenever they were operating on that machine, all the log traffic was being stored on that device and not being seen by any monitoring tools. It allowed them to be in the environment for quite a while, and only eventually did they get caught because there was some traffic seen in there. But that's what an Office 365 credential could mean at your organization or even in a federal agency. And obviously that meant, from that perspective, they're unaware of what data was exfiltrated and so forth because they used the magical hard drive that was mounted, cloud mounted. Scary stuff. From our perspective, we see compromises every day at our support desk. For organizations where we're detecting on their behalf and running the Office 365, we see an identity compromise at least each week and usually each day. So the fact is it's happening in environments, whether you're looking or not. Hopefully, and so for some of these organizations, this has led to business email compromises. We saw a check go out the door at an organization that had not been being monitored, $450,000. We saw invoices for 30K. We saw it being emailed out to customers. We saw a small organization a couple weeks ago where the email sent and just caused a lot of customer confusion, right? So Office 365 compromises are often just leading to emails going out to your vendors, but oftentimes with the goal of soliciting money. So these are real stories. These are real. This is a real impact for your organization. And so what can you do about it? In the last few minutes, I'll sum up. Again, there's things you can do to protect, detect, and respond. Protection, obviously having good password policies, password change management. If your passwords are being replayed, that means that you haven't changed them from one site to another, or possibly are using on other services, you're using the same login and password or have been using it for years and it's being replayed. If you're forming a bad password, that has to do with your password policy. If your users are creating passwords that a dictionary attack would be subject to a dictionary attack, then you have a bad password policy or you don't have technology in place to evade bad password creation. So all of that is part of it. Security awareness is part of it. Azure Password Protection is one of those technologies that can help you not create bad passwords, help your users evade Bears win over the Giants, or whatever type of easy passwords, or even pass at word one, which is a legitimate password from a complexity perspective, but in the top 10 passwords from a guess perspective. Detection, our security review, you do it or we do it, but somebody's got to be looking at a lot of things in your Office 365 to detect if problems are occurring. You have Office 365 by default has a bunch of legacy protocols that get used. Those should all be turned off, and you should have an incident response plan. This was at Azure Password Protection. I think I've discussed this before, but this is technology that if you own it, and a lot of people do with Azure AD Plan 1, you should be implementing Azure Password Protection. You also should be evaluating the implementation of MFA. We have a one-day MFA solution that can come help you turn on MFA for at least your admins, and then we'll work on an enterprise plan with you in a one-day effort. And everyone owns Office 365, owns MFA. There are additional elements that are better in some of the other plans, but most people own it. As a reminder, email compromise obviously starts with the 365 credential, looking at inboxes, trying to impersonate and send out mails. And their goal is to learn a little more about you and then solicit money. And our service is meant to eradicate that, or at least detect that through looking at strange behaviors with Office 365. That service as a whole is not a very expensive service, right? So whether, again, you're doing it or we're doing it at $400 a month, we're also looking at RDP, ports that are opened, and other indicators of compromise. So just food for thought on that. And again, in that same kind of crawl, walk, run, on the three areas where we think you can have a big impact for protecting and detecting, we run trials on all of those items where you can try this service if need be to. We also run a trial for Office 365 in that same space. In a trial for Cisco Umbrella, which is evaluating traffic. So 4 of the items out of that middle column can be trialed if desired for us. So that's kind of our 3 topics: identity, preparation, and ransomware prevention. From a next steps perspective, do know that we're going to, we've got some fall webinars coming up, not only this month in security, which you're looking at now. We have another one at the end of October. But in between, we also have a Veeam webinar. So if you want to talk about backup and how that might help you in ransomware, if that's your primary area of concern, which it should be, we've got a great webinar coming up on the 14th on that. And then we've got a E-rate and schools focused discussion we're having on the 22nd. So with that, if there's any questions, I'm happy to take it, but I know that we're at time and happy to stay on afterwards, but others can drop. Thank you very much.